Jeff Sessions, the Alabama senator, the first member of the United States Senate to endorse Donald Trump, has received the call and the offer to become America's next attorney general. Jeff Sessions is a conservative, very much so, and he was the attorney general in Alabama, also a former U.S. attorney, a hardliner on immigration to be sure, and someone who conservatives will expect as attorney general to offer very pointed advice to President-elect Trump and President Trump on who he should nominate to fill the vacancy on the Supreme Court now created by the death of Antonin Scalia. I can tell you, Josh, earlier this week, when President-elect Trump conducted his first lengthy meeting on the process of nominating someone to fill that vacancy in the Supreme Court, Senator Sessions was the only non-campaign, non-family official sitting around the table discussing this topic with President-elect Trump. A very clear signal to all concerned that he was the most likely candidate to become Attorney General, and in fact now he is. It's only a matter of formality for him to accept the offer. Trump wants him to be Attorney General. Jeff Sessions, because he's a United States Senator, held in high regard by his colleagues, likely to be confirmed, likely to be one of the easier confirmation processes facing the emerging Trump administration. But Jeff Sessions, Alabama senator, early endorser of Trump, strong loyalist, intense conservative, the next Attorney General of the United States.
Is it fair to characterize that high regard as bipartisan?
Well, certainly as far as Jeff Sessions comported himself as a colleague in the United States Senate and doing his work as Budget Committee chairman and other roles. That doesn't necessarily mean, and it certainly doesn't mean, that Democrats agree with him ideologically. When it comes to immigration and other issues, they most certainly do not. But as a colleague and as someone who carried out the obligations and duties of a United States Senator, was deferential and worked across party lines when it was convenient, when it was politically worthwhile for him, Jeff Sessions did all of that. And because he's a Senate colleague, there is a built-in sense of familiarity, if not deference, that will be visited upon the confirmation process.
Major, I want to turn to the other job offer we know about. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn set to be named Donald Trump's national security advisor. It bears mentioning this is a position that does not require congressional confirmation, but how will his past positions perhaps impact reaction to this appointment?
Well, it will create some measure of alarm among perhaps Arab allies of the United States. It might create some measure of alarm within the Muslim community in America. Michael Flynn is unquestionably a hardliner, someone who wants to use the terminology radical Islamic terrorism, wants to describe parts of the Islamic faith as being completely corrupted by this, what he would describe as, and what many others have described as, a hijacking of that faith for terroristic means to justify all sorts of crimes against humanity that have no justification, either as a secular matter and certainly not as something consistent with the teachings of Islam. And Flynn got crosswise with the Obama administration over some of these rhetorical approaches to the war on terrorism and some of the tactical approaches to dealing with counterterrorism. And he said he was fired by the Obama administration from his position at the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. There are those in the Obama administration who would dispute that. But clearly he has suggested himself and positioned himself as a hardliner in the battle against Islamic terrorism. And as National Security Advisor, there is no Senate confirmation process whatsoever. This is a White House appointment. And historically, the National Security Advisor, for those who are personally committed to this, can be the most important position within any president's national security complex. Why? Because you are the coordinator as National Security Advisor within the White House of everything that's going on and coming into the White House from the Pentagon, State Department, and CIA. Now, there have been strong personalities as National Security Advisor. Henry Kissinger is by far the most memorable, who essentially took that position and made it the absolute pivot point for everything the White House did, said, or contemplated on diplomatic, national security, and intelligence policy. Some people have been less aggressive about that coordinating position. I have no clue yet as to how Michael Flynn will approach it, but clearly he wants to be among the last voices President Trump hears once he becomes President of the United States on these national security matters. And when you're the National Security Advisor, you certainly can be that last voice.
Major, I want to get you out of here on this one. The meeting this weekend scheduled between the president-elect and Mitt Romney, by any measure, one of Donald Trump's harshest critics throughout the campaign. What do you know about how this meeting came to be and what they're prepared to discuss?
So they're not going to discuss cabinet positions. Any reporting along that line is off track. Mitt Romney, according to those who I've discussed this with, who are very close to this process, is not going to be considered for a high-ranking cabinet position. There is some conversation that Mr. Trump would like to have with Mitt Romney about what his thoughts about Secretary of State and other matters like that. That is a conversation, a conceptual conversation, I am told. Mitt Romney will be flying well across the country. He's not even in Utah. I'm told he'll be flying from someplace even farther for that to make this meeting. And it is an outreach effort on the part of the Trump transition team. They don't want to create the impression that there is so much bad blood between Romney and Trump that there can't even be a meeting. Trump wants to convey publicly that, yes, in fact, there can be meetings, there can be conversations. He wants to reach out. He wants to mend fences up to a point. And mending fences can be accomplished at a lot of different levels. But you don't necessarily have to mend a fence so completely that you offer someone who was one of your harshest critics on the campaign trail, called you a fraud, called you a phony, and say, oh, would you like to be in my cabinet? I mean, that's a kind of extension of goodwill and fence mending that is distinctly non-Trumpian and is not going to happen. But the conversation will commence, and it will be, and because it was advertised and let out publicly so early, it's trying to create this better atmosphere about those within the Republican Party who took a very hard line against Trump, but now have to come back into the fold. The Trump transition team wants to make that easier rather than harder, so that's how I would characterize what's going to go on Sunday.
Major Garrett in Washington, we do appreciate the time.
Thanks.